So welcome to tonight's AUXCOMM training. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them along the way, and we'll try to leave some time at the end. The way I've structured this tonight is that we will go through some of the setup screens, and I hope everyone's had an opportunity to download the program, get it installed in a folder, look at a little bit of the getting started document so you can do some of the setup. But we'll go through the setup screens tonight one by one and try to get you set up to go, and have a little time at the end. We hope that we can play around with it and you can actually see it in operation. So with that, D-Star is free software, and that's something hams always like. It was originally developed back around 2010 by Dan Smith, KK7DS, and many of you will know Dan as the author of the Chirp programming software, which is still being enhanced along the way. But Dan started this and developed programs through versions 0.3.6 actually. 6 was a slight variation of 5 that included a few things. Now it kind of went dormant for a few years with further development, but fortunately we've had a couple of gentlemen, Mauricio Andreotti and Marius Petrescu. I forget where they are, kind of Eastern Europe, and they have picked up the development and have started new versions. There's actually been a couple of releases, and we're now up to version 0.3.9. There's still other things that we're looking at, enhancements that have been proposed, and they're working on that, and you'll try to see, you should be seeing some benefits of that right now. And as time goes on, we'll have information on where you can find out a whole lot more about this. When you look back, D-Star was developed originally during the early days of D-Star itself, DRATS I should say, during the early days of D-Star, and it used the built-in data capabilities of the D-Star protocol. And so it allows connections on D-Star radios, but also provided the ability to operate in kind of a telnet mode over the internet. And you actually can connect stations by D-Star in the radio or the internet, and those are connected by things called rat flectors, which kind of is a merging of two terms, rat for D-Rats and reflector, like you normally have, kind of like conference bridges. So they can be set up to bridge radio and internet connections to make it very versatile, and also whether or not you have a D-Star radio. Some of the main functions, I'll put these into about 5 categories. One is messaging. Now, messaging gets kind of broad in that it includes like standard email, and you can send and receive to even to standard SMTP addresses. It has been enhanced. It originally had features for Winlink to be able to send messages via Winlink or to Winlink stations. When Winlink enhanced their capabilities a few years ago and added passwords as required, that broke DRATS until recently in some of the new development, and now that is supported again. So you can send to Winlink and reply back from Winlink into DRATS. Another important feature are forms. Forms are always very useful, especially in emergency communications. You'll see DRATS comes with quite a few forms built into it, but you can also generate your own custom forms. And then also the NTS radiogram from ARRL, and there's some nice features with it that'll do checking, and it makes it a little easier to use, and it's fun to use through the messaging features. Another tab that you'll see is chat, and so that's just kind of public chat, but you actually can make some public and private chat or filters in there where, for example, you could have a public chat during an event that everyone is able to participate in, but you could also have a private chat for like an admin back channel, something like that. A feature that I really do like in DRATS is called file transfer. And it kind of looks like those of you who are familiar with FTP or file transfer protocol, the screen looks kind of FTP-like. A feature that's added with DRATS is that you can do unattended file transfer, which means if I connect to another DRATS station, I can download a file from that station without the other operator having to be on the other end. And we'll talk about the protections and security that's involved in that. Event log, that basically captures all of the events that go on, whether it be messaging, chat, file transfer, anything along the way. That also serves as a very good documentation for any activities if you were involved in some type of MCOM event. And then another feature is mapping and position reporting. So you can use the inherent capabilities of most of the current generation and even some previous generations of D-Star radios have built-in GPS. And so that can be sent over the data capabilities of D-Star, and those can be reported either on maps in DRATS or on position sites, APRS type sites like APRS.FI. Now, a feature that's important to keep in mind, a D-Star radio transmits your FCC call sign every time you key the mic or make a transmission. So you've already satisfied the FCC identification requirement every time you transmit. That's good news and maybe bad news for some folks because you always know who made the last transmission. So one thing I always say is if you're an anonymous kerchunker, you're probably not going to like this mode. All right, another feature that is handy since your FCC call sign is taken care of over the air, you can use other types of calls in DRATS like a tactical call. So it could be Shelter 1, Pod 1, EOC, for example, and that is helpful in identifying stations in emergency operations. So if we're getting started with DRATS, there's a couple of places you can download the files. They're usually as zip files, and you do want to get the latest version 0.3.9, and you can find it at dstarinfo.com. And also, we encourage you to join the groups.io called D-RATS, DRATS at groups.io, and in their files section, you'll see the ability to download the file there. Right now, it's not configured as an installer, but you unzip the files and then put them in a local folder on your PC, and it's ready to go. Previously, depending on whether you were operating with a 32 or a 64-bit machine, you had to make a modification and add a file if you were using 64-bit because the 32-bit version was the kind of the basic version, and you had to change one file. But that has been taken care of, and so now if you download the current versions of 0.3.9, they'll work on either a 32 or a 64-bit PC. When you open the program for the first time, it wants you to go through the basic setup. So you'll see a screen like this under Preferences when you first open the program for the first time. If not, you can always do File, Preferences from the main screen, or Alt-P to open this configuration window. And we'll go through some of the setup that you will need for basic setup. Again, we're not going to be able to go into every single feature in depth tonight, but we hope it'll interest you that where you can at least get started, get functional with it, start to use it, and then explore some of the other features. So the first thing that you'll want to do on this preference screen is put in your call sign and your name. And again, that can either be a call sign or it can be a tactical call sign like Shelter 1 or EOC. And that's helpful because your messages, your email, anything that is sent will carry that. Now that becomes real helpful if you are, say, operating in a multi-shift environment. Let's say you have to be at a location for 24 hours and you have two 12-hour shifts. Rather than change the call sign every time, you could leave a tactical call in and not have to change that. But remember, your FCC call sign is transmitted every transmission over the D-Star radio, and that makes it legal there. So that's about all that you really need to do on this screen. One box that you might want to check is showtime in UTC, and that would make a standard time, especially if you're operating over multiple regions. So that's the main thing to get started on this screen. Next thing you want to do, and this is very important, is you want to set a path for file transfer. And what I usually do is I'll have a file that I locate somewhere, maybe in the DRATS folder, but I also put a shortcut to that folder on my desktop. As we go into this, I'll show you the benefit of doing that. You can see the base map storage path and form logo path comes up with default values, and they're only important if you start doing some expanded features with mapping and other form that you may do and have logos for forms. But make sure that you do change this one. It will try to create a folder by default. I think it's called shared, but you will want to set it to whatever you want. But I do encourage you to create a shortcut on your desktop, and that'll make it easier when we go through the files section in retrieving or dropping folders, dropping files into that folder. All right, that's all on this page. Next one is messaging. Now this applies to all the different forms of messaging. What I recommend on this one, the box at the very top, automatically forward messages, normally is unchecked, but I suggest changing that to enabled. And you can actually forward messages through another DRATS station. And we had an example of that several years ago down in Central Florida, where a county wanted to demonstrate that they could operate totally off the internet. So they actually made contact through a repeater on DRATS, and they forwarded messages to the state EOC in Tallahassee. And the way that they did this, they forwarded to a station that they could contact through the local repeater, but addressed it, and the other station was able to then automatically forward that message. Now, when we get into sending the messages, you'll see where this next parameter comes into play, and it's the queue flush interval. So when you post something to the outbox and have it sent, it doesn't automatically go out. It'll wait a few seconds, whatever the value you have set in here, and I recommend 15 seconds is a good value. I think it comes out maybe 30 seconds by default, but 15 is a good value. You don't need to do any of the others right below that. However, if you are going to use Winlink, it by default puts in server.winlink.org and the port, but the important thing is putting in your password. Now, this assumes that you have a Winlink account already set up with a password, and it's very important that that password be exactly the same as your Winlink password, or it's not going to work. And remember, that's also case dependent as well, case sensitive, so you want to make sure that you have that. We were doing some testing the other night on the Gwinnett Aries training net, and I had forgotten that part of the letters in my password were caps, some were lower. So had a little problem with that until I was able to correct that. So with that, that's really all you'll need to get started with the messaging screen. Now, if you want to connect via the internet and you're not using a D-Star radio, you want to set up paths. And normally you'll be connecting to ratflectors, and there's a lot of these out there. I will suggest, if you want to see a list of ratflectors that are out there, go to dstarinfo.com, and then under the DRATS tab, or I think that under reflectors or under DRATS itself, I think there's a listing of published ratflectors. So to create one, and I'll put one in here, you'll see I have it checked, GaAUXCOMM.ratflector.com. So I will actually do the add button, which you see down below, and then I will set it to network, put in the host address here, Georgia GaAUXCOMM.ratflector.com. Port is 9000, that's standard, that won't need to be put in, and password is also not really necessary. So at that point you will add, and then it will come up in the config screen here, and you'll see I have one box checked. You can check multiple boxes to actually receive messages from multiple ratflectors, but that can get confusing because you need to know which one you're sending to. So I suggest only having one checked at a time, and that way you're monitoring that one. And we'll see that in the works here shortly. All right, if you're going to connect via RF, it's not too difficult to do. And this is always a great way to communicate if you're, say, out in the field. Remember that you can connect with, it does require a D-Star radio, and you can use the data cable that provided for data transmitting and receiving. One of the great ways that this can be used for an event, let's say you have a local event, you're within simplex range, so you can communicate station to station on simplex. You can connect through a local repeater, or you can also go through reflectors. And in some cases, you'll have reflectors connected, or reflectors, I should say, connected to reflectors or local repeaters, and then that will give you an even wider area. Now, one thing you'll need to know is how do you set up your D-Star radio, and that can vary from radio to radio. So if you downloaded or accessed the Getting Started with DRATS document, that's either available at dstarinfo.com, it's also available on the Georgia AUXCOMM site, and a variety of places, including drats@groups.io. This will give you a table that gives you all the different parameters that you'll need to set for data transmission and using DRATS. Now, you'll be doing this as a serial port, so you need to know which COM port you're using, and then you will set it up also just like you did for a reflector, and you'll set it up as serial, set the COM port, and then the baud rate that you're using in your radio and what you've set for. And in many cases, 9600 baud is the standard rate. And again, I suggest only having one line checked. As you can see in this example, I have two. So I'm going to be going to a reflector, but I'm also going to be going via RF using my ID51A. Here's an example of the DRATS radio settings. So you can see for any D-Star radio, including the oldest ones dating back to around 2009, 2010, can actually do that and send DRATS over the air, but all the way up through the current generation, that's been preserved as well, so you can do that. And that's included in the Getting Started with DRATS document. All right, when you open up, after you've got everything set, you'll come up and open up into your main menu. Now, several points in the main menu that's worth noting. Remember, I talked about the different features: messages, chat, files, event log. You'll see these tabs. Why are some in black font and some are in blue? When an activity happens under that mode, it will turn blue. So there's been some chat activity, obviously, and see I have that indicated in blue, and when I click on that, I'll know that there's been some additional activity, and I can get to that pretty easily. So those are your main functions that you'll see across the top. Above that, you have your main menu, File, View, and Help. And there's some other things in there under File that you'll also find helpful. If you look over to the right side of the screen, this is a very important area. It shows which stations are currently online with the time since the last activity. For example, if they have not had any activity in the last 1 minute, 5 minutes, etc. But it will show that they are online, either to the local repeater, to the reflector that you're connected to. Now, I'll tell you why this is very important. One is concerning messaging, that to be able to actively send immediately to a station, they must be showing up in the station list. Otherwise, it's going to hold that message in the outbox until that station comes online. So that's important to note, the station's online. And then you'll see your status down in the lower right. Looking to the lower left side, you'll see messages pop up there, and that's kind of an active status line. If you see a file is being transferred, or you've connected to a reflector, or you've connected to a serial port on a radio, those are messages that will show up in the status bar. All right. So if I want to send some type of mail or a form, they're done similarly. Now, if I just want to send a message, the first thing I'm going to do under messages, I'm going to click on new. And that's going to give me a choice, an option for email, a form, text, radiogram, any type of thing that I want to do. So if I select email, I will get this screen that says email message, and you'll see that it looks a lot like a standard message. Source call sign will be your own, and I've designated you can actually go up to 8 characters, I think, with this. So you can add kind of a suffix. You could be kind of like SSIDs on packet, or you could have just a designator. What I did with this one, this was my desktop, so I called it -D. I may call -P that I'm using on my laptop for portable use. Now, the destination call sign, you'll fill in from the list of stations, and it must be exactly like it appears in there. For example, if you look right above that, in the stations list, you see KG5CEN-1. So if I want to send a message to that person, I would enter the destination call sign as KG5CEN-1. And you notice it's been 9 minutes since his last transmission or his last activity. The subject line, just like an email, and then also in the message, you can put that in there. Now you notice at the bottom of the email message, there's 2 plus boxes, one for attachments, and that can be very useful. You can actually attach a picture or another file to your DRATS message. Now, if you send a photo, and this really applies to just about anything that you're doing that's file related. If you're going over radio, this is not high speed. This is not your smartphone on the internet using LTE or 5G or whatever. You're transmitting at about 9600 baud over the air. So you must limit the size of any of your attachments or files that you're sending. And we'll go through some of the guidelines on that. Now, one of the things it does, if I attach a picture, it's going to try to compress that picture down to something that's a little more usable to be able to send. So with that, you can apply an attachment, but then in your message, you can have whatever text you'd like. And then to send that email message, then you will, if you want to save a copy, but you also hit the send icon above. Send via is used if you want to relay through another station, like that example we talked about earlier. And print, you can obviously print if you have a printer connected to your computer. Now, let's say I want to send a form. So I would select under new, and I would select a form. Certain forms are included in the base original download you'll have of DRATS. One of them is the very useful ICS 213 form, which I know many are familiar with who's done any kind of AUXCOMM activities. So if you want to send a 213 form, now keep in mind this doesn't look like your standard 213 form as far as exact look. However, the same information is in here. One of the nice features is it will put your time in there for you and the date, and then you fill in all the information and the message. And again, destination call sign has to be the same as what's showing in the station list. So when you send this, then it's going to send it and mark it as an ICS 213 form. Now, when you receive a form on the other end, it will look like this. It will populate back just like this. However, if I print, it's actually going to print to a browser, and many of the standard forms that are already included, like an ICS 213, like a radiogram, they're going to show in the browser in the exact form. So it's a WYSIWYG type of depiction of the form itself. And then you can actually print from your browser. To print a form, like if you had to hand it off to someone, they were used to the traditional IS-213 form, and they would see it as that. Now, you can also create your own form, and the documentation that you can find on DRATS will also show you how to do that. You can create some quick forms very easy and use them very quickly. However, if you want to create something and then have the look and feel of the original form, you'll have to go into a little bit more programming detail like XML to be able to do that. So you do have these standard forms, and if you're also doing Winlink, that's supported here, and I'm going to show you in just a minute how to do a Winlink message sent from DRATs. So let me see, let me look at the question. Yeah, that's correct. Bobby asked, note that the developers have not upgraded the software for Python 3, which is the standard in current distributions. You can use an older version that has that now. That's one of the things that's a part of the roadmap for the new development in DRATs, that they will upgrade, because this was written in, I think, Python 2, so the libraries have not been all translated yet. So that's a very good point, Bobby, and you can use the old one, and it will be compatible. You just won't have some of the new features, such as the Winlink compatibility. And Doug asked the question, if you send a 213 or a 214 to I assume you mean a Winlink 2000 station, does it populate the form in Winlink? Let me think about that. I don't think it does if you're sending it to a Winlink station. I have not really opened it up. I do have, you'll see in my inbox, I do have some Winlink messages. Let's open it up and see. But it's only going to be in the DRAT side. So that's something, I really can't answer your question, Doug, on that one, but it would be definitely worth checking out. If there are any other questions, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat box. All right, so let's go on to Winlink, and that's good timing on that. When you send a Winlink message, there's a couple of things that you have to format the message slightly different. It's done as a standard email message, so messages, new, email, source call sign, still the same. Destination call sign, you have to prefix as WL2K : space, and then the call sign of that station. And again, that is a Winlink station that you're sending it to. So it's going to add the KG5CEN at winlink.org as it's going through. And then also in the subject line, you need to put / WL2K, and then whatever subject text you want to put in there. And the reason for that is that also tells Winlink that it's not spam, and it is a real message, and it's not a spam message coming in. Jim asked the question, I'm using DRATs daily, and it does not have the Winlink password. DRATs.com, the original DRATs site is not updating. Dan is not updating that, but Jim, as I said early on, a couple of sources for the current version 0.3.9 is either dstarinfo.com under the DRATs tab, or you can join d-rats at groups.io, and in the file section there, you'll find the current version 0.3.9 and also any new versions that come out. So Jim, I hope that's helpful. All right, moving on to chat. Chat is, as you see it here, is public. If you type something in, then it's seen by all the stations looking at chat. So it's helpful for just general information, anything that you have to send out to the group. Like, for example, you could say, we're moving to 145.15 repeater, and that goes out to the group. Now, just down near the bottom, you'll see there's a tab on that screen called Main. You can also create a filter or a channel, and you can have a private chat that it's only directed to certain stations, and therefore you can have a private chat between a couple of stations. Now, it's still sent over the air. However, DRATs itself is not going to decode it unless you are in that private chat. So those are a couple of things that you can do, or you can filter on certain terms or calls, etc. And you can add and remove that filter. So chat's very good. You can also create quick messages or QSTs, and some people are doing this with weather info. And it can query in DRATS certain sites for weather information. So like your local airport code will be put in there, and then it will actually transmit periodically, and you can set the frequency of those messages. And you can actually see in the chat someone who happens to be kind of beaconing weather info. All right, so that's the chat function. And again, you will see as people create something in chat, it will update the station list for their information. For example, if KG5CEN-1 had not done anything for 17 minutes, if he sends a message in chat, it will update him and show no time since that, and then time that out as it goes along. All right, file transfer. I mentioned this before, and I love this feature in DRATS. As I said before, you'll probably recognize anyone who's done file transfer using FTP. You'll see a lot of familiarity here. The left side is your local computer. So the files that are displayed, and here's some important information. The files that are displayed on the local side, the left half of the screen, are the files only in the folder that you have designated as your file transfer folder. And so if another station connects to you, they will get your file list that is in that folder and that folder only. They cannot see into the rest of your folder structure or anything else in your computer. So that's why it's important to designate that folder. And then that's where if you download from another station, it will place a copy of that in there. Or if someone wants to download from your site, they can connect to you and then download to theirs, and they can do that without the station being on the other end. Now, to activate this, you have to go through just a quick procedure to connect to another station. And again, it has to be one of the stations that's in the station list on the right side of the screen. So for example, in this one, I'm going to KG5CEN. I can either type them in, or I can select the drop down to the right of station and then hit connect. And we'll demonstrate this in a few minutes here. But once I connect, and I'll get the connect message, I'll say KG5CEN-1 connected at the lower left on the status line. And at that point, it will also display any files that's in the other station's designated folder. So it will populate that list. And at that point, then you can retrieve one from their list or upload to them. So therefore, very helpful without, I call it unattended file transfer. Don't see any questions on that. We'll actually try to do something with that and demonstrate that shortly. All right, let me give you a few operating tips because we've tried to just get you started tonight. When you're in the RATFlector screen, or radio screen actually as it's called in there, you want to click on one and only one RATFlector or radio at a time, and you'll find that's very helpful in keeping track of where your messages are coming from or who you're sending to. Now you want to check that a station is visible in the station list on the right side of the screen, and that enables you to send email or connect to them for file transfer. There is a way, and I'll demonstrate this when we get to the active screen in just a minute. If you want to refresh that list, I'll show you an option of how you can ping and it will refresh your list. You want to use that kind of sparingly though, as we'll find out here. And Laura posted the link to that, dstarinfo.com, directly drats.aspx, where you'll see the DRATS tab on the home screen there. All right, if you have multiple occurrences of DRATS on the same public IP address, it will fail. So you want to be careful if, for example, you are running multiple PCs through a hotspot, let's say, and you have multiple occurrences. They're all going out through one public IP address. So it's going to get confused in either sending to you, receiving messages, or going out. So be careful on that. You know, there's a tendency sometimes you may want to put or have multiple instances of DRATs going on at the same time, monitoring different rat collectors, but that's going to be confusing if you're on the same public IP address. And again, I mentioned earlier about the queue flush interval, and that you can set that to a lower level, and that what that does, and we're suggesting 15 seconds, it will send out the message. For example, when you are sending an email message, you compose the email message, you hit send, it will wait 15 seconds before it actually sends the message out. And I'll show you a way that you can kind of circumvent that in a minute, but that's a handy thing to be able to do if you need to get a message out immediately. All right, I want to make sure you know a couple of sites before we go to actually going on with DRATs. dstarinfo.com, you'll see in the chat screen, Laura posted dstarinfo.com. Specifically, there's a link there to go straight to DRATs or look at the DRATs tab. You'll also notice that you'll see under DRATs, I think it will take you to a list of rat collectors as well. Great site at groups.io for a lot of good information. d-rats at groups.io. The file section is very rich there with a lot of good documents, including a great detailed manual that has been put together that'll show you, for example, how to create custom forms. Very, very helpful. And a lot of good current information going on. The gentlemen who are doing the current development have set up a wiki. So here's the address, the link for that. Lots of good information. It's categorized very well. For example, on Winlink messages or whatever the subtopic is, it's very, very helpful to be able to gather some information, quick information there. And that's active. Let me see what Doug says here. The way I understand on the public IP issue is if 3 guys in an EOC are running a position, only one can run DRATs. That is true if to the public IP address, that would be the case. Now, if someone's running, let's say on a hotspot or something that would be getting to the internet on a different IP address, they could have multiple occurrences. But yeah, if you present, when DRATs is presenting itself, I should say, to the internet, and there's you're going out on one IP address, yeah, that can confuse. DRATs doesn't know where to return the messages in to you. So yes, good point, Doug, and good to know. All right, with that, let's see here. Let's use some DRATs. Let's get started with it. Let me go back here and let me bring over my DRAT screen. And I'm going to expand this a little bit so that we've got plenty of room on the screen. All right, you're seeing my home screen. You'll want to kind of set up some columns and everything on it, expand it out. One of the features or one of the things that has not been enhanced yet, it is not saving screen positions. So we hope that's something that will be corrected shortly. Now, as you see, I've got 2 Winlink messages, or they're indicated, the first 2 in the inbox by WL2K, and then colon and the station they came from. And one of these, in fact, if I go to my sent file, you'll see I actually sent some messages out. So your inbox, outbox, sent, and trash, like a lot of email clients. So I sent some out, and I actually sent this one to KA4KKF, and then he replied back from Winlink, and they came back to me into DRATs. Otherwise, these were just straight DRATs messages to other stations. And when you open them up, just click on them, you see the email message. I don't have any of the forms I can show you in here. I wish I had one, and then I could open the browser and show you that you get the WYSIWYG look with it. Okay, so if I want to send a message, let's first off, I'm going to come over here This list may not be fresh. Some of these stations have been in here for a while. So I'm going to kind of refresh this. And to do that, I'm going to come over here on the chat screen so you can actually see what's happening. I'm going to right click over here and ping all stations. Now, notice down at the very bottom, you're going to see people responding. You're going to see them coming up in the chat screen. And then you'll also see the station list refreshing. So I see Joe is in there, our training manager, WB4S. I see Larry, AB4NX, and some others in there that are active currently. Now you also see here Joe has sent a message. So if I send something, I'll say, hello, Joe, but that's going to go out to everyone else. And you notice your message is in red. So if anyone addresses it to me and I am listed, let me see, how am I listed on here? You can see on your station, but I am listed strictly as WB4QDX. So I should be showing up in your station list on the right side. And yes, everyone saw this. So you can send them, anyone that sends a chat or enters chat. And first off, I am on the Georgia AUXCOMM Ratflector. How do you know that? It says it right down here. And how did I do that? I'll look under radio. Here I am. I've set that up. If I want to edit that, here's what it took. Whoops, excuse me. Didn't mean to do that. Did the wrong thing. Let me get back to that. And get back here. Let me see. What was I doing? Oh, you notice I connected back to Georgia AUXCOMM. File, preferences, look at radio. If I select that and then edit, here's what it took to create it, just like in the setup. If I want to change that, I can do that. Or others, for example, I've got the Georgia Aries one in here. If I need to edit it, I can add, delete, etc. But you're putting in as a Ratflector, you're putting that in as the actual name. Now, not all will have Ratflector as the name, but WA4YIH was nice enough to set up a domain for ratflector.com, and you can register with that so that you have whatever Ratflector you want to name it show up as a very common name as yourname.ratflector.com. All right, so we're set up here. As you'll see, I've set mine up the same way. Now I'm going to show you something here. I set this up in my DRATS folder and create a transfer. However, I also have over here, I created a shortcut on my desktop called transfer, and I open that folder. Here's all my files in here. Now, why would I want to do that? Let me go to files and let me show you. Here is the list of my files that are in that folder. That also matches what you see over here on my desktop folder. Now, I cannot open these files directly from DRATS. Maybe that's an enhancement we'll see one day. But I'm going to have to go to the folder itself to be able to open the actual file. So that's why it's very good to be able to see it on your desktop, and it's easy to get to, or any way that works it out easy that you can get to the files. So let's say I want to send a file that I have somewhere on my PC. I would actually just drop it into this folder, and then it will show up. I may need to refresh, but it shows up here. So if I can also trouble Joe again, I'm going to assume that he set up a folder, and I'm going to try to connect to him. And we'll watch down here. Let's see if I connect to him. A lot of people are doing things right now in here, and that's what we always have during the demos. Let me see. I can't tell if I connected to him with some of the other activities. I don't see a file list, but I know someone who will have that. Let me make sure I'm disconnected.
I don't have any files in there.
Okay. I know Larry usually does. Larry's not in here anymore. Oh, yeah, there he is. Let's connect to him. I can type it in, or I can drop down and get him and connect. Connecting to AB4NX. I'm connected to him, and voila, I got a list of his files. So now if I wanted to download one of his, I could download this form here, and I'll say download, and it's going to start that process, you'll see, to download that file. Now again, I emphasize you want to do small files. You would never want to do like an Excel or a Word file because Microsoft adds a lot of overhead. So a very simple text list would become quite large if you tried to send it as a Word document or an Excel file. So text files are excellent and a perfect thing to be able to send. So as you see, it completed, it says it was received, and now it shows up in my local folder here. All right, so that's easy to do. And so if I want to send him one, I would select it here and upload it while I'm connected to him. So you see that the file transfer has started. It negotiates, sends, and it's sent. And now he has that folder. So that works out very well. Now, I said I would show you the event log. This is a great way. It's almost like it tracks everything that you're doing. So if you miss something, you can go back and refer to your event log and then make sure that you capture anything. Shows when I connected, everything I'm doing. I sent files, I received files. And then on forms, let's do that real quick because we're running out of time. If I do a file, new, if I do a radiogram, this is neat. Put the destination call sign in that I'm sending this to. I put the number. I do the HX that I wanted. And if whatever message I'm putting in down here, just type something, it's going to calculate the check digit for me. I never was very good at doing that. So it's going to calculate that for you, and then I would send it. So that's a way that you can do that. Another form we saw, I think the ICS 213, there's a couple of versions in here. And I think there's a lot of forms out on the file section at drats@groups.io as well. So Joe asked, can I delete a file in someone's folder? No, I cannot do that. I don't have that option. I can delete my own, but I can't delete someone else's. All right, any other questions? Again, this was I wanted to get you acquainted with DRATS and go out and let you start using it, and you'll learn a lot. And I will say that if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email at wb4qdx@aol.net, or some of you know other email addresses for me. You're more than welcome to ask any questions. We did find that DRATS was very useful during several events. And again, like any mode or application that you use, it's not going to be the best thing to use for every single situation. And that's why we use different things for emergency communications, like Winlink, like NBeams and FLDigi, and then also DRATS. And depending on a particular situation, one may be more useful than another one and be very beneficial for you. So we've done a lot with these. DRATS was actually used during Katrina in New Orleans because they could reach a station across the lake and then connect into the internet or transfer messages, forward messages along. All right, with that, I'm not seeing any more questions. I hope that that was useful. Get out there and get started with it, use it, and we'll see where we go with it from there. All right, Joe, you can take back control if you would like. I see, Jim, I noticed your comment in the chat. I'll try to get with you tomorrow on that.
All right, John, definitely thank you for your time and your expertise and sharing that knowledge with us. I want to see if there were any more questions from the audience. If there are, please unmute and go ahead and ask your question. We have just a few minutes left. All right. Not hearing any more questions, we're going to move on. So Georgia AUXCOMM performs monthly training for all its members, and it's open for everyone that sees this, either in Aries or amateur radio. Our next training will be September 24th, and the topic is going to be emergency management operations. We'll have an EOC or an EMA director here to talk about what happens during an emergency in an EOC. So watch the Facebook, Groups IO, and our newsletter for the invite for that one. That's going to be another good training class. All right. For more information on Georgia AUXCOMM, here are some sites that you can reach out to. So we have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, an Instagram account, we have a YouTube channel where all these trainings are hosted. We have a website and a Groups IO page. So if you'd like more information on Georgia AUXCOMM, please feel free to visit any of these sites and pull that information down. And if the audience will stand by, let me pause the recording.